team in the world, we are known. As we follow on, we are the people through and through, the bold and blue since.
Good day, all, and welcome to Bold and Blue 1872. My name is Chris, and I am again joined by my friend Jack. Jack, how are you doing, mate?
Not bad, Chris, and good morning still at the time of recording to everyone who is tuning in or wherever you are in the world. So it is nice to be back.
Yeah, so you've just said good morning there, and as soon as you said it, the corner of my laptop caught my eye. I've just come back from Asia. That's why I've not done a video for the last week, and it still says it's 7:20 in the evening on my laptop. So, suppose it's a little reminder, no matter where you're joining around the world, it could be any time of the day. So, good day all, once again. Like I said, I've been away for the last week, so we've not got a video up, so and a lot has happened. Yeah, I've been joking with Jack. Yeah, every time we post a video, Rangers has a unique way of coming back and slapping us in the face to remind us that we know nothing until, and we did touch on this the last time, until that scarf's above the head. You don't really know what's going to happen. So Kevin Muscat was our last video. Prior to that, Stephen Gerrard, both of those appointments have fallen through in that time since we did that last video. So yeah, let's get into it. The week that was, a few results along the way, some new managers at different teams in the SPFL. I think it's worth noting. But yeah, Jack, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Muscat, I think I made it quite clear my excitement the last time, and I know it's been covered to death at this point. That's fine, but I still want to give my opinion on this, and I'm sure you do. You too, Jack. But Muscat, I was heavily all on board that train, and for whatever reason, and there's conflicting stories about what's happened here. We'll get into what the board representation of Cavanagh, Thelwell, and Stewart that kind of was part of the appointment announcement of Rohl. That will also Rohl, sorry, need to get used to that one. Part of the announcement of his appointment, which we'll get into in more detail, but I don't know. I'm conflicted because the excitement was there for a couple of appointments. I'm on record in our last pod of saying I didn't want to talk about Danny Rohl because I didn't think it was even in the equation. I thought it was just part of part of a managerial search, and names pop up left, right, and centre. He, of his own accord, had eliminated himself from the whole equation at some point anyway. So very surprised to see how it transpired. And I'm not going to lie, I was disappointed. Now, time might prove me wrong. I didn't think that Rohl had the CV that we should be looking at. But on the other side of that, I'm also very aware that there's been a lot of coverage from former fans of his fans of his former club, Sheffield Wednesday, that speak very, very highly of him. So there's optimism to a certain extent that Rohl is the right appointment. But I still don't think it was the right appointment. I suppose if that makes sense. And I'm not sure how much of that is my disappointment that one of the candidates of the other two would have been my significant favourite ahead of anyone else. Never mind Rohl. It's nothing against Rohl. I think just overall, I was very enthusiastic about one of those appointments, and neither has transpired. But yeah, we'll talk about Rohl in more detail in a second. But just that kind of whole, for lack of a better word, fiasco. I mean, what did you make of it, Jack?
Yeah, just as you said, so we were very much all aboard Stephen Gerrard. That collapsed. Then we got to Kevin Muscat, and we, were convinced. We're like, we're going ahead with this. I mean, it might be the first and last time I tune in to watch Shanghai Port on the Friday when they were playing. And yeah, there was a lot of shock for me, I have to admit, and a lot of kind of dread that this had kind of, well, as far as I was concerned at the time, had fallen through. Like, I know there's conflicting reports about, was it timing, was it football and structure, etc. But my initial reaction was, oh no, what are we going to do? Um, and it just didn't seem great in terms of a managerial search that two candidates who, for all intents and purposes, seemed like a dead cert, and then both removed themselves from the process, as far as we know. And the official line has been timing. So yes, it wasn't a good look, shall we say? And I was not impressed with it overall.
Yeah, I think in the last so we're recording on Tuesday morning now, so we're talking about a week ago now that this all kind of transpired. But even in the last 24 hours, I believe that Muscat's team has come out and confirmed that what Cavanagh and Thelwell and Stewart had said is actually legit. It was to do with the whole Shanghai port end of season timing. I just, I don't, again, I hope that Danny Rohl is successful. I don't want to take away from that for 1 second. And again, we'll get into that in more detail. I think he's definitely done a lot of the right things so far, but I just, I just can't get away from the disappointment. Those two candidates and I'll stress again, I was all on board the Gerrard train, but I think the Muscat one really got me, really got me excited. And for the sake of 5 weeks, could we have not waited? I don't know. So let's talk about that appointment. There was a conference, a press conference that was held. Cavanagh was there, Thelwell, Stewart, and they they formally appointed Danny Rohl into the position. Thought Danny Rohl spoke very well, and as it's transpired since then, I think that he's continued to speak very well, and everything that's coming out of his mouth is given his strong indications that he. I don't want to fall into the trap of, because we've seen this before, right? But he's saying the right things, and he seems to get it. If you want to say it that way, certainly far more than the last manager. That I'm refusing to even go into detail about that one, but certain things that he's doing, he's giving us all the right signals. But I do want to talk about that, because I've not had the chance to do it. I do want to talk about Thelwell, Stewart, and Cavanagh's comments in that conference. So I think that it was no surprise to me that it almost kind of appeared that Stewart kind of sat in the background. I have heard people describe it as like a naughty schoolboy getting into trouble in the headmaster's office, just kind of sitting there waiting for his pelters. And yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. I mean, never could a CEO be less inspiring than what I seen from Stewart sitting there. And then Thelwell for me gave. I've heard it said that he actually spoke quite well, and he took on all answers head on. He took on all questions head on. But I'm sorry, his answers were just bullshit. Some of the stuff he was coming out with was just nonsense. Talking about. I've stressed in the past, I don't want to keep banging on about Chermiti's price tag. I want to judge him on the player that he is. But the price tag does tie back to Thelwell directly. So I think it was some of those questions around that and some of the comments that he's made. And again, I hope that Chermiti proves me wrong, and that he does turn out to be worth every penny. But but yeah, he's talking about like his transfer policy and how he does think that the market in England has worked, etc. And you know, I just felt that like everything he was saying in terms of what we've been seeing on the pitch was just contradicted significantly. So it just felt kind of, I don't know, I just felt like that. And this, I know I've said this before as well, and maybe it's me being silly, but he seems very unconfident up there, and these hand movements all over the place that he does. That from my experience is another indicator that he is not confident in what he's saying, you know. So before we talk about Cavanagh, because I think for me personally, Cavanagh and his comments are a bit more material, because I think there's already the jury has already been concluded on the other two. But just your thoughts on Stewart and Thelwell.
So just to kind of highlight what you said there about Patrick Stewart, it couldn't be any more uninspiring from a CEO. Any answers that he did give were just people are saying it's kind of like corporate speak. It's almost like holding statements. There's no real, not really answering the question. Such almost more like a kind of a politician's answer. But if I was just being honest off the bat, yes, I think Kevin Thelwell spoke better and handled the questions better and was more forthcoming than Patrick Stewart, which kind of says a lot about Patrick Stewart as a CEO. Now, granted, I have heard people say in the kind of closed forums and not in front of a television that he's much more, shall we say, chatty or wants to have more of a discussion. There has been that kind of angle put about, is he just uncomfortable with that whole situation? Either way, if he is uncomfortable with it, he's got to almost put that facade on, because he's the CEO of Rangers Football Club and you need to, you want to see a bit more. Kevin Thelwell, the answers were bizarre in terms of, like you said, talking about the English market being effective and working, etc., versus what you're seeing on the pitch so far. It doesn't marry up. So, for someone to come out and say that when you can clearly see something else, to me, that just, it's bizarre, makes no sense. And yeah, just the defending of the Chermiti signing, again, for me, I'm wanting to go on and see him score loads of goals, and do well. And I am of the opinion as well, it's not his fault that that's the price tag that we paid for him. That's nothing to do with him. But to defend it as in, like, talking about the I'm sure he actually quoted that he scored goals, and then just like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, I know he scored goals at maybe some sort of youth level or whatever, but in terms of his professional career, what has he scored? 3 or 4 goals? If that, I'm really not sure off the top of my head, but it's not, an amount that you can justify as having like a body of work. And then, yeah, just some of the comments around, like, obviously his son being appointed and defending it, and it was just all a bit bizarre. So yes, he was better in the face of it, but and I know we went round the houses with Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart, but I didn't come away from it feeling any better about the situation, and or any more confident in him as the sporting director.
I can't imagine being part of a boardroom and sitting across the room from Thelwell and listening to him. I don't want to, like, like I've said this before, I've done this guy to death. I think I was one of the worst to put a video out there questioning whether or not this appointment was legit, based on his background. So I've always had concerns about him from day one. But I can only describe him, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but he is like, if the two Chuckle brothers had a child, this is exactly what I would do. The way when he sits there with his hands going up and down, all I can hear is "to you, to me, to you, to me." That I'm not even joking. It just comes across that way. I can't imagine sitting across from him. And I do go back to the conversation earlier. If you are like the likes of Stevie G and Muscat, and you're sitting across the table from this guy, would he fill you with confidence that he's the guy to go out there and try and find you the players that you want? Albeit, I think everyone is at the club has now come out and said that no players will be signed without the manager's approval. Whether you believe that or not is another thing. But does that guy fill you with confidence that he's going to go out there and get you those right players? And I just don't think so at all. But so I don't know if you've any. Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, just on like you were saying there. I mean, talking about sitting in front of that guy, and like in terms of if you were Steven Gerrard or Kevin Muscat. I mean, some of the terminology, like we've all heard they used the 25-8 scenario in terms of.
I mean, that was ridiculous.
And it's just like that moment is just like you're like, oh, you really saying that? And it's just there's just for me, there's just no real confidence in it. The only one thing I want to say, but is that I do appreciate the fact that they were even there. Now, that doesn't mean much for something, but they could easily not be there if they chose to. Even for example, someone like Andrew Cavanagh, he doesn't have to be there at that press conference. And whether they were all lined up by Andrew Cavanagh and told you are going to be there and kind of almost face the music, because there was going to be that ultimate distraction for from Danny Rohl. I did feel a bit like he was kind of a sideshow at first. Because it was all around him. So, I will say fair play from that perspective, but it doesn't change my overall opinion, particularly the 25-8 comment.
Yeah, I mean, you could only imagine. Even Robbie Thelwell was probably on the blower to Kevin like that. What the fuck was that, Dad? It just kind of sums the guy up, doesn't it? That comment alone. But you did touch on the fact that Cavanagh was there. Now, Cavanagh did come out originally when the takeover was complete, and he did stress that you won't see me a lot, but you'll see me when things are going wrong, basically. And things have been going wrong. So he was there. And back to your point that Thelwell and Stewart were in attendance. I thought it was fairly damning of their roles at the club, that Cavanagh continuously had to kind of step in and even when questions were not directed at him specifically, he was saying, "I'll answer this one. I'd like to comment on that one." Me and you spoke about this before we started the recording today, Jack, but I don't believe. I do want to talk about Cavanagh in more detail in a second, but just that factor alone for me is significant. I think that Cavanagh is not confident with these guys. Now, he's made a comment and I could be off here, but basically it was along the lines of, if things are not right, you change it, right? Cavanagh was very clear on that. That's why they made the decision to let Martin go and appoint Rohl. So what about the other factors in that equation? Why is from my opinion, what every fan can see is quite crystal clear. There's some other problems there. So if you've made mistakes and it's not right, change it. Why have you not changed that? And this is where, for me, Cavanagh, I've heard a lot of people say he speaks really well, and he took on all questions. He did do the separate session with the fan media separately with I think it was 4 lads, Heart and Hand. Someone else was there as well. But he did go into a lot of detail about transfer policies and what they'll be doing in January, how they'll support Danny Rohl moving forward. And I'm sorry, I don't care what people say, what their words are. I always judge people on their actions. So sitting up there and telling me if it's not right, change it. But then keeping Thelwell and Stewart in their positions, for me, is as contradictory as it could be. For me, and I've said this in the past, Thelwell and Stewart for different reasons, but Thelwell for me specifically could be a worse appointment than Martin was, because Thelwell appointed Martin. Thelwell has backed Martin with the players that he wanted. Again, of his own acknowledgement, no players were signed without the manager's approval. So if that's true, every one of those players were signed because Martin said so. So from that perspective, how can you remove Martin from his position but not remove Cavanagh? I just find that a massive contradiction.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, the one thing that sticks with me is I think the question I would have is why? Like, you know, what's the reason? Like, you know, because you went part of the way in removing Martin, so in theory part of the mistake. Then, you know, why not, you know, removing both parts of it? You know, whether that's Thelwell and Martin, or was it, you know, Martin, Thelwell, and Patrick Stewart for that matter. But I mean, I think when I think of the comment that Thelwell made in that club interview with the club TV around, you know, Martin was one of the best coaches he's ever worked with. Like, you know, to make that comment, and then he's obviously then been part of the process that's effectively removed him, where he has or where it was down to Cavanagh individually. But he's still there. But he's made that comment. It just, for me, like, I can't get past that, regardless of what he says. Like, that just sticks in my head, and I'm like, you know, I can't understand. If it was me personally, that would be my question. Like, you know, even if it was like an off the record, not an official, I want to know from Andrew Cavanagh, like, why, what is the reason? You know, because is it down to the fact, you know, like people talk about, like, you know, having to pay people out their contract, etc. But as we've heard from Cavanagh at that press conference, you know, he's kind of indicated that Rangers will go and spend money on players, etc. So if the money's not really an issue, then why is it still there?
Yeah. I'm going to be, for anyone that's tuning in. I'm not going to hide this. My issue right now is with Cavanagh. I have done Thelwell. I have done Stewart to death. And I will not. I think that Cavanagh's feet need to be held to the fire for continuing to persevere with these appointments. So time will tell, but don't be surprised if you hear me talking about Cavanagh moving forward more so than Thelwell and Stewart, because I think all that's been said that needed to be said about Thelwell in particular has been said. So if the powers that be continue to persevere with those guys, then it's no longer Thelwell and Stewart that are the problem. It's the ones that are continuing to let that continue. So, but let's move on to something a bit more positive, right? Danny Rohl. We can know you. You made me laugh a couple of weeks ago with your roll with it. We can no longer do roll with it. Apparently, it's Rohl. We're going to have to find some puns to work that one out. But I've heard Rohl the Roost, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's Danny Rohl. So maybe slightly contradictory to what I said earlier on in terms of my disappointment of not getting one of the other candidates that I was more in favour of. What I will say is Danny Rohl has certainly impressed me from the outset in terms of the way that he's speaking. And again, I don't want to repeat myself, but we've seen this before. That's one thing. But at the end of the day, it's a good start, right? He's keeping up the club traditions, and a lot of people are making a lot about that. What I will say about that is, and I said this about Martin before, if you've got credit in the bank to be able to change a tradition, that's one thing. If you've done nothing to give you that privilege, that's a totally different thing. And I think that Danny Rohl is definitely learned from, maybe he would have done this anyway, but certainly it seems that he's learned from the mistakes of the last appointment, and he is keeping up the club tradition. So automatically, saying the right things, seems like a good guy, doesn't seem too arrogant, even though I think you need a little bit of that arrogance. And I think he's got that. He seems to have an edge to him when you hear him talking. Doing all the right things from a tradition perspective. So yeah, I mean, could Danny Rohl have got off to a better start? We'll talk about the first two results under his tenure in a second. But in terms of the man and how he's come across, what have you made of that? Has he impressed you, Jack, or any concerns outside of his CV? Maybe I'm not sure if you want to touch on that as well. But
so just before I go any further on Danny Rohl, someone better give him dispensation for not wearing the brown brogues on the touchline and let him wear some coppers, because I have seen the video of him on the touchline against Cavanagh, frantically jumping about, demanding his team do this, and it looks like a fair few times he's nearly slipped. So if he wants to wear maybe coppers for that, bring them on, put them on at the touchline.
need to get some studs on those brogues. Maybe, I don't know.
But in all seriousness, for me, I'm just starting from where I was with it. I wasn't confident at all. Like, even CV aside, and I know he's worked at some, big clubs. He was at the German national team and all that, but I just didn't know what I was getting, and that's the God's honest truth. I did spend a bit of time listening to, there was Sheffield Wednesday kind of podcasters and whatnot taking part in other podcasts and talking about Danny Rohl and saying that, this guy's like the one, for you, and you need to give him a chance and all that. And I went, do you know what? Okay, I'll do that. I'll give him the chance. And I have to say, I have been quite impressed. Again, like you said, yes, it's, we've been there and seen it before. You say the right things, you do the right things. But again, for me, the fact that he starts with not going against even a simple tradition is wearing a suit, he's on a better footing than Martin was.
Yeah.
The way he carries himself in a press conference, I don't get that sense of arrogance that I got from Martin. So I'm comparing, and I just feel that there's almost, again, I say this quite a lot about certain people, but there's a quiet confidence that as an edge, and he speaks really well. No kind of we're going to do this and we're going to play this type of football. It's very much, this is what I want, one step at a time, and that's it. He doesn't really, he doesn't make you come away from the press conference going, oh, you're not too high, you're not too low. You're just kind of going, right, this is what he should be saying, and that's it. We've done it. And for me personally, the fact that his first league game at Ibrox, he gets a win, he's able to walk around all four sides of the stadium, clapping the fans. It's a big comparison to where Martin got, because Martin really didn't get that chance. He was always off the pitch. Obviously, it turned pretty quickly. Yeah. But I get the impression that a lot of fans, I'm not seeing everyone's like, oh, this is going to be the most super successful, manager we've had. But I feel that many are willing to give him a chance. That's the kind of sense of atmosphere I get from what I've seen, is that, this guy has started the right way. Can't necessarily say it started well or whatever, but he started the right way. And he's going about it the right way. So for me, good first impressions, but ultimately it comes down to what the team does in the pitch and what the results say.
How much of the initial first impressions, I keep getting alerts on my computer. Are you hearing that, or is it just me?
No, not a thing.
Oh, good. How much of this is that, obviously, I think that every fan wants to give every man. I think even there was a decent portion of our fans were willing to give Martin a chance, right? Even though there was a lot of negativity around his initial appointment. I think that after a few weeks, kind of when the dust had settled, fans were like, well, okay, let's give him a chance. But how much of Rohl's appointment, and he does seem to have a massive amount of favourability from the fans. There's an overwhelming amount of fans that are saying give him a chance, and that's great. I'm not. I don't think it should be any other way until he proves us wrong. We should give him a chance. But how much of it is because a lot of fans are acknowledging that he's maybe got one hand tied behind his back with other factors at the club, and we'll talk about the squad in more detail in a moment, but how much of it is about fans are more direct in their negativity towards Thelwell, Stewart, etc., and that's given Rohl more credit in the bank to start with before he's even done anything. I'm not sure how to explain that better, but yeah.
I think it's a fair point, because a lot of the sentiment I'd also seen when he was appointed was good luck, Danny, you're going to need it, because of the environment he was walking into between the kind of senior management side of it in terms of Thelwell, Stewart, etc., but also in terms of the quality of squad or perceived quality of squad that he was coming in to work with. So Yeah, I think there is that. Just for me personally, I just, and again, it could be the fact that he's doing the right things compared to the way Martin done it, but I tried my best to give Martin a chance, and I wasn't on board. But I'm like everyone, I'll give them a fair chance, fair crack at the whip, and I just never bought into him.
Yeah.
And with Danny Rohl, I do, but I think that's just in general how he communicates, and there's not this. I don't get that over arrogance from him, so maybe that's why, and maybe, you know, maybe that the fool is me, but you know, I genuinely, I just got to have a different feel entirely. Sometimes it's quite hard to put your finger on, even taking the traditions and doing the right things aside. For me, there's just a different feel, but it could be all those things together. You know, the environment, you know, the players,
Yeah.
everything he's walking into, and you're kind of saying to him, you know, if he can do something with that, then you know, well done.
Yeah, he seems to have, like, I don't comparing anyone to Martin is not fair, because you're probably you're probably overwhelmingly going to be positive to whoever you're comparing to Martin, right? But small things like, you know, Martin constantly, whenever he was asked about, you know, the fishbowl of Glasgow and Rangers as a club and the pressures that come with it, he constantly said things like, you know, it's no different from any other club, you know, and that used to drive me crazy because that is a complete lack of acknowledgement of what Rangers is and the pressures that comes with it. That Danny has not done that. He has acknowledged head on, you know, the history of the club, the expectations of the club, and he speaks towards it, and he confronts it and gives really good answers in terms of how he wants to deal with it. But he okay, so we glanced over the Dundee United. Sorry, I haven't even mentioned the Dundee United fight. I did mention in the last video. Didn't think there was much in it, so we're not going to touch on it. Disappointing result. We drew with Dundee United under Stephen Smith. Thank you, Stephen Smith, for stepping in there for 45 minutes. I think it was going great, and then the second half not so much. But let's touch on Danny Rohl's first game in charge. And I'm not sure how much emphasis we can put on this being Rohl's first game. He'd only been in the role for 2 days at this point. We take on Brann, and just, you know, an appalling result, an appalling performance. I personally don't think anyone came away from that game with any pass marks whatsoever. Didn't agree with the starting lineup, so I suppose that if I was going to be critical of Danny Rohl, I thought that was probably, you know, one thing that that you could put his way. But he's just come into the job a couple of days. Maybe he's, you know, continuity of the last few games. He just wants to, you know, he's not had enough time to put his ideas in place, and maybe that takes precedence that what had happened in the last few games before that materializes in front of our eyes against Brann, Brann being, I believe, the lowest ranked team in our group. What is the group? 36, 38 teams, is it?
36.
36. So the lowest ranked team out of 36 teams in our group. Give us a hiding, basically. And I don't think we look dangerous whatsoever. But the one thing I would take away from it is we go back to Danny Rohl again at the end of the game, makes a point of going over and talking to the Rangers fans, and walks off that park with the Rangers fans cheering his name. Subsequently, after the game, there's some videos of fans confronting Stewart and Thelwell at the airport with some less than savoury language. So yeah, I don't know. It's disappointing where we find ourselves in Europe, bottom of the table, -5 goal difference, is it now? Some actually esteemed company down at the bottom of that league. There's some good teams down at the bottom with us, but that doesn't really help. We should be doing a lot better, but I don't know how much we can put into the Brann result. It's not really on Rohl, probably just a kind of fallout from the Martin era, and maybe the next game that we're going to speak about, we've seen a bit more of what Rohl's bringing to the team.
Yeah, I just on the Brann result performance, I totally wholeheartedly agree that nobody get pass marks at all. Like, I really just, I watched it, and I'll be honest, I got excited. You know, you've got a new manager in, you're like, right, let's see what can happen. Yeah. Totally fooled myself into it as per usual. And then spent, you know, the rest of the evening hiding behind the couch or cushions or whatever I could find. But again, I don't particularly put that onto Rohl. And just touching on a bit about him and his conduct, like, you know, going over and taking the time to speak to the fans, like, yes, it's very easy to do in terms of like the action, but it takes a lot for him still to do that. He understands in terms of what the environment's been like, you know, in terms of the relationship between fans, players, the team, etc. But he still went and done it. He fronted up to it again, which I have a huge amount of respect for. And for him walk away with the fans singing his name on the back of a 3-0 defeat, it just seemed almost a bit bizarre, but, you know, it was kind of like, you know what, yeah, like, okay. And then I know there was the Thelwell and the Stewart kind of instance at the airport, but there was also pictures of Danny Rohl actually talking to fans at the airport, you know, almost being a peacemaker, but for something that's not been his doing. So, yeah, I kind of, for me, when I was looking at the Brann game, I was like, I would like a result, obviously. But personally, I would be more judgmental about the game we're going to talk about, which was the Killie game, obviously. Because I just thought we had to almost get out of the way, where it's a win, where it's a loss, whatever. But it just had to be put away, and then we could give him more time, because he's not getting a lot of time, to be fair, on the pitch between, you know, games, midweek games, weekend games. You know, it's a game tomorrow, so.
It took a lot of balls for it. He didn't just kind of. He wasn't like 5 or 6 meters away from the fans.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right up. I mean, you could see the local police getting in between it just to make sure. Obviously, nothing would have happened, but he was right up there in their face talking to them. That one could only imagine that's pretty intimidating, and he had the balls to go and do that. Dare I say, you touched on the fact that he was talking to the fans at the airport as well. Dare I say he's acting like a manager, right? Not a head coach. He's acting like a manager. He's at the forefront, and he's willing to you know, take on all the kind of the negativity that's coming from the fans, even though it's not being directed at him. He's stepping in there, and he is he's bearing the brunt of it, and one can only admire that. He's not. He doesn't come across as a very intimidating individual, right? But he certainly seems to have some balls on him. That seems to be undeniable at the moment. So that for me, I mean, I've spoke specifically in the past about a leader of men. If that's the kind of man he is, that breeds confidence in me in terms of how his man management might be.
Just to touch on that as well, the fact that, see that level of calmness from him, like you don't get this, you know, he's again not too high, not too low, and I know I don't like him, but I'm going to go back with what I can compare to, which obviously the previous was Russell Martin. Like there was almost a sense of like you can almost sense his mood, if that makes sense. Like whether you were, you know, watching him on the sideline, press conference, whatever. Whereas I don't get that from Danny Rohl. It's very much like, you know, I'm here to do my job. I'm going to give it my best. And as you said, he's doing the role of a manager. And for me, it's the fact that he stepped in there when it's not been of his own doing, you know, but he put himself in there. So I like this idea that almost I kind of get the sense that he wants to bring everyone together in terms of on-board fans, players, etc. Taking the ownership and, you know, Thelwell and that out of the equation for the moment. Like, I think that's the sort of thing he could go on and do, which, you know, is amazing because everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, I'm getting the impression that he might, for lack of a better way to describe this, he might slap Thelwell about a little bit. I just between the two characters. Bearing in mind, this is a guy that basically, with all the pressures that was coming at him at Sheffield Wednesday, and that's transpired into more of a basket case in the last week as well, with the administration and stuff. So, I mean, could there have been a more stressful situation to be working under? And he ultimately turned around and told them to F off, right? Because they weren't paying the players, etc. And he walked away from them. I mean, that's, you know, there's some integrity about this man that's maybe in retrospect, when I was talking about Danny Rohl in the past, I wasn't given enough acknowledgement to, and very, very quickly it's starting to transpire that this is a man that I'm able to admire, and maybe that didn't, what on the surface that wasn't there immediately, but over the course of even just 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks, what are we now, 10 days?
Yeah,
Even that,
like
yeah, 11 days. Yeah, and let's talk about the Killie game, right? So that's for me. This is where I've spoken in the past, and I'm not going to cover it again. Pragmatism. Didn't agree with his starting lineup, personally, but ultimately we go out there, give a decent account of ourselves in the first half, but it starts to slip away from us. In the second half, what we see from Danny Rohl is he makes a number of changes that is not, again, that rigid ideologue approach that I've spoken about in the past that I didn't think worked. He completely tears it up in the second half, goes a different way, changes the formation, changes the approach, and ultimately, for me personally, that second half is one of the best displays of football I've seen from Rangers for quite some time. I actually didn't want it to end. Now I know it's Killie. That's fine. And Killie at home is typically not been a problem for us. It's usually Killie away that's the problem on that picture there. But and maybe I'm making excuses for us there. But ultimately, that's been proven to be a bigger challenge for us. But Killie at home typically should be a result that we're expected to win. But based on recent form, I didn't come into that game feeling overly confident, that's for sure. Certainly after getting scalped off Brann as well a few days before it. But I thought it was a very significant performance in terms of what we can expect from Danny Rohl moving forward. That he approached it one way, recognised that he needed to make changes, made those changes, and those changes were impactful. And ultimately, we come away from that game quite comfortable. Actually, probably we should have won the game by a couple more goals. If you could argue we possibly could have walked away 4-5-1 up. So yeah, thoughts on the game, Jack.
So yeah, I think for me that first, just the key thing for me is that kind of flexibility, as we talked about. It wasn't rigid. I mean, at the same time, with kind of the changes he made, for example, bringing Mikey Moore on, Mikey Moore's been getting a lot of, criticism. And he just goes, you know what, I'm doing it. That's
deservedly so, to be honest.
Exactly. But he does it and he goes, you know what, I'm doing it. I'm changing the system, whatever way. And it's like, this is how I'm going to get the best out of it. Now, yes, I do agree that Killie at home should be, I say a given, but, we're expected to win it is the best way to look at it. But I wasn't confident. I've not really been confident in any of the league games, really, So the fact is that he could come in, do it, and on the back of that Brann game where nobody get any pass marks, and just some things for me, because I was very keen to watch how they kind of move the ball. Like, I'm not one of these like XG counter pressing, football, people, but there is an element of goes. I want to see how the players are taking the ball and moving it forward, and there was a lot more forward thinking. I think he also made the comment afterwards about you want to be more short, sharp, quick passes, but they will go backwards, but it's not going backwards for backwards' sake. It's like, going backwards to go forwards. It's not side to side. It's not. And I just kind of came away from it. Same as you, that second half, I kind of went, I didn't want that to end. Can we have another 45 minutes of that? Because it was actually quite enjoyable. So I think the fact, it's his first league game at home. They've got 3 goals. Could have been more. He's adapted, which is what you have to do. You know, I don't know how many times over the years, particularly recently, I've been kind of screaming at halftime or 60 minutes, go and change it, do this, put this person on, you know, go to up top, whatever it is at the time. So the fact you can do that is a very, very good thing for us and for Rangers. So I was impressed. Yes, we had the mistake in there from Jack Butland of all people. Welcome back last season, Jack Butland is kind of how I felt. But you know what? Again, he did make a really good save. Pretty certain it was the second half. Could be wrong. The header kind of down at his right. You know, so he still had his moment in that regard, but. You know, and Yusuf Chermiti gets a goal. I'm really, really curious to know, Chris. There has been some chat about it. And you might know where I'm going with this. Is down to Yusuf Chermiti's celebration.
I don't know, mate.
Curious to know what you think.
Yeah, listen, I can understand. He's obviously not, unless he's living under a rock. I'm sure he's seen some of the talk about his transfer to Rangers, and even the criticism of him his time pre-Rangers as well. So from that perspective, one could imagine you strike a ball from a bit of distance, you get what I can only describe as an assist from the goalkeeper. But nonetheless, it's a decent strike, right? He's got it on target. I can only imagine that there is an overwhelming feeling for you to kind of run over and say, "Look what I can do." I don't necessarily think that if there was ever a goal that you wanted to celebrate that way, that would be it. Because it was, in my opinion, a blunder by the keeper. Right, that keeper should have saved that all day, every day, and twice on a Sunday. So. From that perspective, but I don't want to be over critical of him. I think there's, like I've said before, I think there's a lot of fans that are just willing to jump on Chermiti at every opportunity they get, just because of that price tag. And I will stress again, he did not pay that money for himself. He you know, the club chose to pay that money for him. That's on other people that decided to do that. I want nothing more than for Chermiti to do well, because we've spent that money on him. We need to get it back some way as well. So, and he does look a player. I know sometimes he's maybe not shined as well as he could. This guy is getting a game for the Portugal under-21s. Like the Portugal are no mugs, you know. If there is a player there, whether or not we've overpaid for them, different discussion. That's not on him. So I don't blame the lad, but I just think that he probably could have chose a better goal to celebrate like that, because the goal was fortuitous, to say the least, you know. So
I'm just going to jump in and say there is definitely part of me, and I believe it or not, I wasn't saying it to get a response of he should not do that, because I actually kind of like that in a footballer. Now, context to it. But I like a bit of, you know, we as fans can all give it out. You know, we've got to take it back. However, the caveat for me is go now and back it up. You know, you can't do that and not back it up with more goals, and, you know, being decisive, big goals, big games, you know. But what I will say is there was definitely a lift of his confidence from the goal. Like, he looked, and this is not, you know, groundbreaking, but he just looked like he was able to take the ball in a bit more. It looked a bit more like, it's almost like there was that kind of weight lifted off his shoulders. Everyone likes to say, you know, striker, get a goal. And, you know, it's that kind of first goal, you know, but he looked different compared to how he was in Brann in terms of even just his first touch, like after he scored that goal. So, and I will agree, he looks like an athlete. He looks like, you know, a player. And as you said, Portugal under 21s, you know, you're not going to get there if he doesn't have something about him. But yeah, I couldn't not highlight that he done it. But for me, it's just, I like that kind of attitude of, I can give it out too, but you need to go back up. Now, I don't think it was probably the place for it, but now he's done it. You know, you need to go into Wednesday, you need to go into Sunday, and keep producing as such.
Well, that's it. He's going to look like a right mug if that's his only goal he ever scores at Rangers, right? I mean, I'm sure that won't be the case. But I suppose, again, I think too many people are making too much of it. I don't think it was as bad as what has been made out. But I don't know. That the keeper needs shot for that one for me, but it is what it is. What I would say as well is, Danny comes back in. I'm a massive fan of Danny. I think he's not in recent form, obviously, but I think when Danny first came to the club, I seen signs of a really good player, and I think he's been really unfortunate with a lot of impact injuries that he's had at the club, and he's struggled to get back into the team. And he gave a press conference the other day there about his disappointment. I think Danny's a player that wears his heart on his sleeve, and you can see there's a player there that wants to do well, and he's just kept having these setbacks. And then over the course of maybe the last kind of 6 months to 12 months, he's found himself struggling to get back into the team, and he comes in and does what Danny can do, I believe, and kind of puts a lovely little head on the ball. And we've seen that from him before. He scored some cracking headers for us, including the one that got his face smashed. Was it St Johnstone? Was it?
Yeah, it was St Johnstone.
Yeah. Really put himself in the danger zone there and got taken out. That cost him a significant part of his season. So delighted to see that Rohl is not just resigned himself to Miovski and Chermiti and has given Danny a chance, because I think there's still a player in there. I really do. So delighted to see him coming in and do well. But also I was the way that when you were watching Rohl on the touchline, just his constant at the team whenever they were kind of slowing down or not going forward, he was on them, balling at them. Do you know what I mean? So I think that kind of relentless pressure on the team to kind of move forward, and whether or not that suits us in Europe, that'll be a different story. But certainly in the SPFL, I think that'll prove dividends, that approach. So I thought there was a lot of positives to take from that game. A lot of positives, barring Butland's attempt at a punch. I don't know what it was, but you're right. He did make amends with. Was it Tav that blundered it and went out?
He lost him.
Yeah. I'll spend a video one day talking about Tav, because I think that deserves its own hour, maybe 2 hour long show. But right, so good result against Killie. It's one result, and again, it's Killie at home. How much we can make of it, I'm not sure, but there's definitely some positive signs there. A lot more positivity coming out of that than there was going into it. I think that's an understatement. Is there an overreaction from a lot of fans about how positive they should be? I'm not sure. we are crying out for positivity at the moment, I suppose, and it's understandable that a lot of fans have jumped onto that results and they've seen those little glimpses of what we've just kind of covered there that was all very positive. But ultimately, leading, we end the weekend still significantly behind the front two. Hearts play Celtic. Hearts beat Celtic 3-1. Hearts are ultimately running away with the league at the moment by the looks of it. And maybe even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was very don't know if I was kind of undermining the challenge that they might pose, but I just kind of I felt maybe it was another Aberdeen that we were seeing here. And I did say at the time a few weeks ago that I wanted to see how that transpired for the next couple of games, including them playing against Celtic, and they absolutely thumped Celtic. So, Rohl has a lot. Rohl just doesn't have the old firm to compete with this season. It does appear we've got a third challenger, and it does appear they're the favourites now. But I do want to touch on, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, right? I'm not going to do it with our friends at the other side of Glasgow. I'm not going to dedicate an entire pod to talking about them. But I'd be ignorant if I didn't acknowledge what's happened in the last 24 hours. Celtic and Brendan Rodgers have parted ways. A brutal statement from Desmond coming out, absolutely slaughtering Rodgers. Basically called him out for lies and mistruths and misleading the Celtic support, all this kind of stuff. I have literally, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you've seen something from another football club, never mind the Old Firm or in Scotland. I've never seen a more brutal statement from a board or from a representative of a club coming out and talking about a manager that way. So they bring in Martin O'Neill for what is apparently an interim appointment. Sean Maloney comes in with him as well. Brendan Rodgers' entire backroom staff, by the way, it's been reported in the last few hours as well. They've all left. Kennedy is how long's he been there? I don't know, since the Stone Age, I think. I mean, I must have been a teenager when he first started playing for them. And I know I look fresh-faced and stuff, but that was a long time ago. So he must have been there for about 30 years. Whatever's going on there, and this is more why I'm touching on what's going on over at the other side of Glasgow. Seems like there's just as much of a basket case going on at the top end of their club as much as one could say there is at our club. Although maybe we have a board that is more willing to invest, which is one thing. But my concern is, regardless of what's happening over there, maybe they are there for the taking. We now have a Hearts team that seems to be the ones that are taking advantage of everything that's going on right now. And to their credit, are playing some great football. Anybody that's watched Hearts this season under McInnes, a lot of the signings that they've made seem to be, they've got it spot on with just their recruitment. Seems to be been phenomenal in the summer there, and that leads me to kind of where I want to segue. I do want to get your thoughts on the Celtic. The Celtic fiasco, for again, lack of a better word, how that impacts us. But ultimately, I think Hearts seem to be the ones that have got their recruitment right, and that's where I want to focus on next. What does Danny Rohl need to do in the summer to turn things around? Does he have enough already? So I've asked you a lot of questions there, but thoughts on the Celtic stuff that's going on at the moment?
Just touch on it. I would be lying if I said I wasn't shocked in terms of how it all came about. I do listen to a lot of opinion in Scottish football in general, and I think it was a very kind of well held view that he wouldn't be there at the end of the season. Fine. Yeah. I think just to touch on the statement, he's been absolutely two-footed by Dermot Desmond, which was just it was an incredible read, shall we say. I mean, I've seen statements, but I've never seen anything quite like it, and that's not being sensationalist at all. It's the God's honest truth. I read it and I was a bit like, what? So yeah, for me, I did initially see Martin O'Neill was coming in, and it was a bit like my brain went back to Martin O'Neill, of the past, and then I'd realised he hadn't been in there, been in management since the spell 6 years ago. It was 2019 at Nottingham Forest, I think it was. So I don't know. I know Sean Maloney's there, and he obviously has been more recently employed, as a manager, coach. And I imagine he will do a lot more of the day-to-day and the on the grass stuff. I could be wrong.
Who was he at? Was it
Wigan and Hibs? Wigan and Hibs, yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't last long at Hibs. I don't know how long it lasted at Wigan. So I don't know. Don't really know where that leaves in terms of the opposition and what you're looking at. I don't know. I think for me personally, the most frustrating thing is kind of like you said, that's happening over there. And, we're not in a position to take advantage of it. And therefore, Hearts are running away with it. And as you said, fair play to them. they have played some good stuff. I can't lie. I've watched them, and I'm like, you know what? I've been pretty impressed. I definitely watched the game on Sunday, and I was quite impressed again with what I've seen. Regarding recruitment, if we're looking ahead into January, the first thing I'd like to know is, can we ask Hearts if we can borrow their computer first and foremost? But in all seriousness, I'll be honest, I don't really know where to go with the squad. I mean, you look at starting just with the back four. I mean, the goalkeeping position is fairly, that's fine between Killie and Butland. But I know we're talking about the end of next season, and you've got a lot of your back four out of contract, on loan, etc. For me, I think he needs to look at some sort of cover for left back. Not even cover, but like another option in there, because Jaden was good, relatively good at the weekend, going forward, etc. But he's been exposed so many times, over the last X amount of games. He can't be the out and out left back. Not only is it not fair to the team, it's not actually fair to him. And I'm not saying he won't go on to be a good player, but
yeah,
he's just
unless you want to play free at the back every game, I don't know.
So that would be a starting point for me. It's quite hard because, I mean, you look at, I would say, like, well, you've got Gassama, obviously he played on the right at the weekend, predominantly has played on the left, and then you go, well, you've got Ant-Man on the right, but Ant-Man's just not looked the same since initially he came in. Is that going to change? I imagine it hopefully would, but I find it quite difficult to pinpoint what they need to do. I do honestly believe, but that left back is a must. Like, just start with that. That's, then you look at, well, what's happening with Max Aarons? Like, is he really going to come in and get a game? Is he going to take over from Tav? Can we send him back? Do we then get another? I don't know, because obviously you've got Sterling coming back as well, who again, and it's that big if he can stay fit, he walks into that team right now. And he's not even played for so long. So I am a bit unsure of where we go, but left back is definitely where I would be starting. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, just to close off on the again, don't want to ponder on this one, but Martin O'Neill coming in, I think that is good news. I think it's good news for us. Martin O'Neill is notorious for setting up a team that is all power and all pace, and that is exactly what Celtic are lacking at the moment, significantly. So I think that's going to be a massive flop. So I'm looking forward to how that transpires to be. I might end up with egg in my face there. Like you said earlier on, the Martin O'Neill years. Probably for me, quite fond of those years. It was probably the one time in our history where the old firm was just going head to head every season, right? They couldn't have been any closer. Two very good teams during that period, especially kind of Dick Advocaat, Martin O'Neill years head to head. Very fond of that time, but I don't know. Is Sean Maloney going to be the long-term appointment? Let's see. But ultimately, getting back to the recruitment, Hearts. I mean, we've seen this play out at Brighton. There was a lot made of it. What's your man's name that's took over Hearts? Sorry, it's ploughed the money in.
Oh, Tony Bloom.
Yeah,
Jamestown Analytics.
Yeah, thank you. It's one thing to look into a computer and look at statistics. It's another thing to have the right people in place that are looking at those stats and saying this is what we need for the SPFL to be successful, right? Because the stats might tell you a player is one thing, but in terms of what you need for the SPFL, they've got spot on. And this is where I think that we've made a massive blunder. I think that potentially we've looked at the stats and we've seen, like Manny Fernandez is a prime example. He has literally been recruited probably because Purdy seen him play well against Everton for that one game. But also on top of that, his aerial statistics on paper look phenomenal, right? But that you need more than that. That you need something else about you. But when you're playing at centre half in Scotland, you need to have some balls on you, basically, right? and we don't seem to have any central defenders that are capable. Cornelius is definitely the strongest, probably across our entire back four. Cornelius is probably the standout defender right now. But even Cornelius, in my opinion, is pretty average. But he's a lot better than what we've got. I mean, that for me is the glaring issue with our team at the moment. That defence is absolutely shocking. Just shocking. Soapy is why we continue to persevere with Soapy. I know we've spoke about how he does all right for Scotland, and that's fine. Scotland, you play for Scotland, Soapy's probably probably plays well because all he has to worry about is the 6-yard box. You take him beyond that, you see a lot of frailties there, and that's continued to be an issue with him. And he did actually, I mean, last season before he got injured last season, I thought he was playing really well, if you recall. But since then, he's been awful. So Soapy for me needs to come out. We need. I think that I'm not happy with the recruitment in the summer, but ultimately I think that they've done it the wrong way around. They've bought in a bunch of potential when they should have started with bringing in the leaders first, right? So there should have been a spine brought into that team. Soapy probably is one that I would take out. We need a dominant centre half in there, someone with experience that could probably play next to Cornelius. Magoma on the left, we absolutely need some backup there, preferably someone permanent instead of our only left back being a loan signing. I've heard talk about could Enciala play there? Who knows? We've never seen him play there, so I don't even know why that's part of a conversation. And by the way, this winds my ticket, this one, but it's just while I'm on it. Why did any players that can play left centre back, automatically everyone talks about, oh well, they can just play left back. Like what that never happens on the right centre back side, right? Never. You wouldn't see a right centre back and just say, oh, Soapy's a right centre back. He could play in the right back. That's fine, It's a total different position. So please, anyone out there that's doing it, stop it. Honestly, can he play left back? I'm sure he can. Like just the same way that you could stick a set of gloves on him and put him in the goal. Doesn't mean he's going to be competent at it, but we need to sign a left back and preferably a permanent one. So left back, and then I'll go back to that spine. Centre half, a leader, someone in the middle of the park that's got something about them that can maybe play alongside Raskin that can help. Rothwell I don't know what's going on with him. Looked like a decent player before he came to us. I don't know if his legs have went in one season. I don't know what's happened there. Maybe him and Raskin can't play in the same team. Maybe he's better suited being pushed forward. I don't know what the answer is, but he certainly doesn't seem, for a mature player, I was expecting a bit more leadership to come from Rothwell, and I'm not getting that. I don't know where Raskin's head is at. He seems to have fell off a cliff since he was brought back in after all that debacle with him and Martin. And then, just through that spine, I'd just like to see some dominant players. I think we are. I honestly think we're 2 or 3 players away from having a good team, but they have to be experienced, and they have to be leaders, and they have to be dominant, and they have to be able to grab a game by the scruff of the neck, and that is what we're lacking with that team right now. You cannot tell me, right, Chermiti, wherever you talk about his price tag, under 21 Portuguese international, Oliver Antman, young again, 23 years old, smashed the statistics over in the Dutch league last season, established Finland international. Is he a bad player? I mean, he didn't get shit overnight just because he moved to Rangers, right? Theo Asgard, Norwegian international, is part of what the Norwegian are talking about is their golden six. It's a gold. They're saying there's a golden age. Obviously, Haaland is at the forefront of that, but I'm not sure if you've looked at that Norwegian team in the last kind of 12 months, but they are looking pretty spectacular. Theo Asgard is one of those golden six that they've been talking about. He's not got shit overnight. And I think we've seen some real strong glimpses that there's a player with him as well. He just needs to be a bit more confident and a bit more dominant. And I think a leader in the team will probably help him. You know what I mean? Miovski's done it in Scotland before. Gassama, we've seen strong glimpses that there's a good player there. And there's, you know, he came with glowing reports from Sheffield Wednesday. Lyle Cavanagh, I think, is a decent player. You know what I mean? There's a lot of talk about Aarons and McGoma and all this. I don't. There was too many loans done in the summer there. I think that they were used as a patchwork. You know what I mean? Just a patch-up job just to get players in because we needed them. Aarons, I had my concerns about him in the first place when he came. I think he's been shot for a couple of seasons now, and he hardly kicked the ball for Seville last season when he was there. So I don't know how that transpired. Maybe, again, ignorance from Thelwell, thinking that you could just bring somebody up from the Premier League and they would do the business in Scotland, and that's not the case. I don't know, mate. I genuinely think we're a couple of players away. I mean, Mikey Moore, I've slaughtered that boy. Absolutely slaughtered him since he's came to us. To the extent where I started feeling bad about even mentioning his name anymore. Probably just before me and you started doing the pod together, Jack. Don't know if you've watched some of my prior work. Mikey Moore was getting it tight from me every week. So, but he had a good game at the weekend there. So, I genuinely just think we lack a bit of leadership. And the leaders that we have at this club right now are surplus to requirements. If you're led to believe that Butland, Soapy, Tav, who's the other one? Dow, for fuck's sake. If that's the leaders at our team, then I'm not surprised that we're lacking apparent leadership on that pitch, because none of them are leaders ever, in my opinion. Like I said, we could get on to Tav for a whole different pod at some point, but we've got bigger problems at the moment. But yeah, for me, I'm confident that Rohl can get a tune out of these players right now, but come January, he absolutely needs 2, 3, maybe 4 experienced, dominant, and players that hopefully have some experience winning. But ultimately, they've shown before that they've got leadership attributes.
Just want to very briefly touch on, like, just you talk about recruitment models in there. What you'd said, I was listening to you list off the players, and it definitely, listening to the list strikes you in terms of like the lack of leadership. In terms of, like you said, there's a lot of potential there. There's loans, which I think, to be fair, has been acknowledged by Andrew Cavanagh himself in terms of, you know, the loans, and there was too many of them, etc. So I get that. But I was just having a quick look at some of the, you talk about an ideal kind of blend of recruitment. I know this is not a Hearts podcast, but you've got the mixture of the data, but also the combination of who's looking at it. So, you know, some of those Jamestown analytics signings, such as, you know, you get Claudio Braga and Kizaridis, for example. You know, these are guys that were in Slovak First Division, the Norwegian First Division, but not even in the high kind of Norwegian First Division teams.
Yeah.
And they've worked. But then you've also got McInnes bringing people in like, you know, Stuart Findlay. You know, you've got players like Craig Halkett. It's like the blend between what he knows works and the potential, whereas we've very much went statistics, like you said, Manny Fernandez, like his heading statistics. You know, he looks like, you see him and think, you know what, this guy will develop. He's going to head the ball. He's going to get up and get physical. But that's just based on these stats and what you see, you know. But who knows the player in terms of who's looking at the player as in what you're seeing? Like you said, yeah, Partey might have seen him play well against Everton once and meant he'll do us. But I definitely think there's got to be a different approach that way. Like, you know, how much influence Danny Rohl has with it, you know, we'll get to that point. Yeah, so it'll be an interesting window in January. The thing for me is bringing these players in, yes, but how do we get rid of certain players that would need to move out because you don't want a bloated squad? That's an issue.
Who do we need to get rid of, though? I mean, if you think about those players I've been through, a lot of the duds have been loans, right? Not all of them. Right? I like Ngoma, by the way. He's a young boy. Is he 19? Is he even 20 yet?
He's 19.
He's 19. I thought for a few games in a trot, maybe 3 or 4 games ago, he looked a right player, right? But ultimately, he's in loan. The Jigger, I think he's been a bit of a disaster. Mikey Moore, again, he's played one good game. Otherwise, he's stacked the place out. Max Aarons has been rotten, apart from, again, maybe one game where he scored that goal. But, going back through, maybe Manny Fernandez apparently has been injured for 6 weeks, which I don't think anybody's caught on to this. He was on the thickened bench about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So how do you work that one out? I'm not sure. But apparently he's been injured for 6 weeks. Nobody told us, but must have been sitting on the bench with some ice on his ankle, whatever was happening. Yes, I am being sarcastic there. So apart from Manny Fernandez and Joe Rothwell, do we really need to get rid of anyone else? I know Oscar Cortes was made permanent in the summer there, and he's away on loans. Time will tell how that one transpires, but I don't think there's many we need to get rid of. Maybe there's still some of the duds from before. Leon Kingster around, Kieran Dowell, Rabbi Matondo, Ben Davies. I think they're all out of contract at the end of the season. Maybe not Kieran Dowell. I think he's got another year after that. But how many do we need to get rid of? I don't know. I don't know. Certainly, some of those loans should be sent packing back to where they came from, by the looks of it.
I think that's for me. Sorry, just if we can do that and have replacements lined up, and to do that, then I think it should be done because, well, I'm not seeing every one of them, like you said. Do you keep Jaden as a backup? Because as I would agree, he's not been the worst. Like, I think it would be unfair to say he's been the worst, and he is 19. Like, I just had to check that he's not even 20. He is 19. So there will be an experience from him, but like Max Aarons, I'm sorry, but why is he there? There was a left back experiment, then they put him to right back, and then you had to take him out and put Tav back in. So it's just if they can get out of ones like that, then please, same with the Nasser Jiga. I genuinely, and I'm going to hold my hands up here, when I seen him come in, I went, this guy could stroll it up here, in terms of what he looked like, and it's just all fell apart from him, and to the point where he's not even really been seen. He was obviously seen in Brann, and then didn't play against Killie. So, I think if you can get rid of some of them, then you could look to replace them. But like you said, it's got to be leadership. It's got to be, people who can take the game by the scruff of the neck, not just about what potential they have. I will take a leader. If they've got more leadership than potential, I'll take that right now.
Yeah. You touched on the balance of Hearts as well. Do you know what I mean? They didn't pull out all stops to keep Shanklin around in the summer either. Do you know they didn't do that for no reason. I think McInnes is probably a bit more savvy about having that blend, which I think we've been lacking at Rangers. So, like, if we could find a couple of those players, like I'm just going to throw a name out there. I know McLean has been talked about for a number of years. Maybe it's past his sell-by date at this point, but that's the kind of player that maybe needs to come in and show some leadership, and someone that understands. He's a diehard Rangers fan, right? Would I like to have a higher quality or maybe a younger player than him? Yes, definitely. But I go back to my Shanklin comparison there. I think that just having some diehard Scottish boys in there that understand what it is to support Rangers might not be a bad thing. They are few and far between. So whether or not we can get those players to come into the club and form that spine is probably unlikely, but he would be somebody that might tick that box and might be willing to come. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I didn't know those players had came from the Slovakian and the Norwegian leagues. Jack, you mentioned them, and I'm automatically again. I'm like, are you telling me that Ant-Man wouldn't be, wouldn't be performing in those leagues? He would be, easily, I would imagine. So, I I just want to stress. I think we've got some good players there. I just think Thelwell and his team, and you touched on as well. Look, that the having the statistics, etc. I've mentioned before, Purdy is a stats and analysis guy, right? He's never been one to be going and watching players and getting a feel for who the player is live in colour experience. He brings in Robbie Thelwell. Robbie Thelwell, by my understanding, watched a lot of YouTube. Technical scout. Well, right. I don't want to be too negative about Robbie Thelwell. We've touched on that before. But are we lacking some presence in that scouting team that is more than just looking at stats and analysis and actually going and watching players and getting a feel for it, which is what Davy Weir is notorious for doing down at Brighton. So I think that is a box that we need to tick probably, and hopefully Rohl has some say in that, and maybe Thelwell, etc., might acknowledge that. I doubt it. I mean, when you're hiring your son, not sure that's you making the best appointment. And again, I've done that one to death, so I'm not going to go back on this. But ultimately, to have confidence that we've got the right people in place to make what needs to happen in January, I'm still not sure. I'm at the point now where I'm like, we're kind of forced to give these guys another chance because Cavanagh has given them another chance. But what they do in January, I hope, and by the way, I'm not writing off the next couple of months. I think Rohl might get a tune out of this team over the next couple of months based on what we've seen with Killie. I think Europe's done, right? Considering some of the opposition we've still to come up against. I don't know if we've got much hope there. But yeah, I mean, we've got the League Cup semi-final coming up against Celtic. We've got Hibs coming up. This season could look very different in the next 7 days. Very, very different. But ultimately, I think that how we end the season will depend on what happens in January based on those needs that we've just spoke about there. I'm still not confident we've got the right people in other positions of the club to make that happen. But yeah, don't know if you get any thoughts on that, Jack.
For me, it just comes down to how much Rohl can get his input in there and how much that's listened to personally. Because, yeah, I know they say it's, nothing's ever, it'll be like the manager and it's what was the word they used? Essentially it's a rounded approach to recruitment, from the sporting director, the scouting team and whatnot. But he needs to get his input there as much as possible, because the thing for me, what I would say is if he keeps ticking off results and doing well, then it kind of gives him more of a foothold, in terms of, this is the point I've got to with this. This is what I need to go to this next level or whatever he wants.
You mean like a manager?
Yes, like a manager. So, that's honestly, I'm not really sure where it will land. What I do totally agree with is how much the next 7 days can actually change, even just the general feeling. I mean, you go and beat Hibs tomorrow. Again, not an easy game by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But saying that, we did manage to beat them in the League Cup. And then you've got obviously the big one on Sunday. I really don't know where I am with that. Originally I was like, I'm not sure. Then I was like, well, you know what? There was a 0-0 with them. I've kind of flip-flopped a lot. Then I was on the back of the whole, fiasco over there in the last 24 hours. I'm like, you know what? Maybe, so for Danny Rohl and, Rangers and for all the fans, it'd just be great. Like, it'd just be good to get that. You're into a cup final, but what I will say is, I think Danny Rohl's very much a one match at a time mentality. And I know we hear that a lot and it's a bit of a cliche, but I genuinely think that's the best way for him to handle it until the end of January. Just take one game as they come. Europe, yeah, I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed Rangers in Europe over the last few years. It's kind of hard to say that I'm, it's quite weird to watch it on a Thursday and be like disappointed. You're You used to kind of, Europe was always a bonus. When I was growing up, it was always like, you get to maybe the group stage of the Champions League or get to the last 16 or, get somewhere in the Europa League. Whereas the fact that I'm now annoyed that we're having a terrible time just shows you how well we've done. But, for me, it's all about domestic football. And I've been trying to find someone to fit this in, but I wouldn't rule us out just yet.
No, I'm not. You're right. I mean, it's October, right? We're not even. What date is it now? 28th. So it is kind of ridiculous for me to be sitting here and saying Europe's gone, and I'm not sure what we can do in the league. Hearts might capitulate. There's every chance of that. They have the squad depth. Bearing in mind that I don't believe, Hearts don't have Europe, do they? So, so they can focus entirely on the league. And maybe it would be smart for Rohl, considering where we are in Europe right now, to kind of, I'm not saying we shouldn't give a shit about Europe. Financially, it's not a good idea for us to do that. You want to win some games in there, even if there's no, even if it's an unlikely prospect that we're going to move forward in the Europa. Financially, you still want to get some wins under your belt in there. But ultimately, the teams that we're coming up against, we've still got Porto, we've still got Roma. I know Roma's having a terrible season, by the way, but there's still some good teams in there that we're still to play. So, Ludogorets as well. Who's the other one? Anyway, I don't like. I think Europe's a write-off at this point. So, from that perspective, maybe we can have a level playing field with Hearts and concentrate on the league. So yeah, I'm not writing the league off, but I genuinely think if we can finish second this season, that's the first step forward. That should be probably our minimum expectations, because I think that like we covered earlier on, there's a basket case going on at the other side of Glasgow that we should be taking advantage of. But I just genuinely think it depends what happens in January. If we go out and sign a bunch of duffers again in January, or not, sorry, I shouldn't say a bunch of duffers, but if we go out and all we're doing is we're just signing players with the thought of the prospect of getting a profit back on them, that's not going to work. There needs to be a mix there, because I think that's what we did in the summer. We need to go and get those leaders. We need to get those people that might cost us a few million and we'll never get that money back on them. And that's fine, because you need that mix and you need that blend. If some of them can be Scottish as well. But that does just lead me on to the last thing I want to cover with you, Jack, unless you've got anything else on the players. But there is talk about Rohl bringing in a Scottish appointment with his backroom team. So far, that's not been confirmed. Four lads and Heart and Hand, and was it Follow? I think that was the other fan media that was there with the leaders a couple last week. But they did say that the Rohl was going to be bringing in a Scottish member of his a member of his backroom team that was Scottish and had prior history with the club. So yeah, I've seen a lot of names being floated around. We've seen Stephen Davis, Lee Wallace, and Neil McCann seem to be the three prominent names that are being discussed. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'll give my thoughts in a moment, Jack. But what do you think of that? Do we need that to happen? Is that a good move, or is it just I don't know? Are we just bringing somebody in for the sake of it to maybe appease the fans? I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. But what do you make of that? The potential for that appointment?
Now, normally I might have been of the opinion that it was being done to appease the fans and, go, look, we've got someone who's Scottish, or, Rangers, they understand, whatever you want to term it. However, just going back to Danny Rohl, I know he done it at Sheffield Wednesday. It was Chris Powell he brought in with him, that English coach, alongside his other two kind of coaching staff that he brought in, who it was that local coach who knew the game.
Yeah.
So for him to do that, I think it would be beneficial. And I know, and I do know that, you know, Lee Wallace and Steve Davis are some of the names that we mentioned, and along with Neil McCann. I'm just going to very put it out there. Neil McCann for me would be the best option, just purely from the fact that he not only has he been a manager, but he's also just been in at Rangers recently. But also, I think he handles himself very well, just from what you see, like on the media and how he talks about football and how he sees the game. I think it would be a no-brainer, and that's not anything against like Steve Davis or Lee Wallace. It's just I think out of if that's the three that are in the mix, then it's a no-brainer. I can't even make an argument for the other guys. Like, yes, they would know what the club means and know what it's expected, etc. But you know, there has to be someone there with some real footballing like CV behind them in terms of being a coach. And as I said, I think Neil McCann would do that. And I don't think he'll be afraid to speak his mind so much either in terms of being direct, whether that be with like the rest of the coaching team, management team, or with the players. I actually remember towards the end of last season when I was at the St Mirren game in Paisley, and I just remember seeing him on this touchline. He was just, you know, he was constantly when I was chatting to Barry, or you know, he was just there, like, you know, and just nipping away, and like, and I'm like, that's what you want, you know. Like, I think back to the worst I can compare it with is Alex Ray when he was there under Philip Clement, and no offense to Alex Ray, but I just don't know what he was doing there in terms of like, you know, what was his role. It almost like he could have been a cardboard cutout, and I know that sounds terrible, but you know, there was nothing from him as far as I could see, but that was that kind of, this is a Rangers person, you know, so I would be all for it. But yeah, I know you probably have a similar opinion.
Yeah, I do. I can't disagree with a word you've said there. The one thing I would add to it, Jack, is Alex Ray is a prime example of, you know, let's bring in a Rangers man just because they won a couple of medals. It needs to be more than that, right? It can't just be, you know, that they're familiar with winning at Rangers. They need to have something about them tactically, personality-wise. And you've hit, in my opinion, hit the nail on the head there when you, from a comparison perspective. Alex Ray was never that person, in my opinion, and ended up kind of falling into the background and probably damaged his reputation with the Rangers fans, to be quite honest with you. I suppose he's seen as a bit of a yes man to PC at this point. I just don't think, not that I'm saying Steve Davis or Lee Wallace would be that either, but I think there's more evidence to suggest that Neil McCann won't be that Neil McCann has a bit about him. He's got a bit of grit about him where he'll speak up and he'll say, he'll challenge and he'll share his thoughts. I've been on record in the past of saying that I believe if it had been Neil McCann and not Barry Ferguson that was leading that team towards the end of last season, I think we might have seen a lot more positive results and probably some more positive performances, and definitely some better use of some of our younger players, etc. That Barry seemed to have completely forgotten about when he came in. And you only my logic on that was just based on listening to the men themselves. Barry is, you know, he's on his radio show quite a lot. Have you ever sat and listened to Barry on that radio show? I'm not going to turn this into a Barry session, but I'm just giving a comparison here. Barry talks utter shite on that show. Some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth is unreal. That's my opinion. Whereas every time I hear Neil McCann talking, he speaks sense, he speaks logic. I haven't seen that from Davis. Davis seems a bit more timid to me as well, and I could be wrong about that. Obviously, I've never been in a dressing room with the guy, but definitely seems a bit more reserved, and I'm not sure that's what we need, because I think Rohl seems to be quite reserved already. And Lee Wallace, you know, I think his only experience right now is coaching it under under 18 level, is it?
Under 18, under 20. Is it the Hearts? Is that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I like Lee Wallace. Didn't really play for Rangers through a very successful period. You know, ups and downs, I suppose. But yeah, I think Neil McCann is a standout candidate there. If that's what's happening, I know Neil McCann gave an interview in the last couple of days where he's kind of distanced himself from the Muscat appointment. I wonder if that's strategic because he knows that he's now being potentially in the loop with the Rohl appointment. I hope that's the case. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but yeah, Neil McCann for me would be the ideal appointment. Big fan of McCann, but yeah, I don't know. Do we really need it? You know, you look at the success of clubs around Europe, and there is always a familiar face in the backroom team at most clubs. I don't think that's a coincidence, regardless of who the manager is. I mentioned, I don't want to talk about Celtic, but I mentioned Kennedy earlier on, right? But there is typically someone very familiar with the club that is in a backroom team that with most successful clubs. So I think that speaks volumes. So I think yes, we do need somebody, and I hope it is Neil McCann. But if it's Davis, if it's Wallace, would I be complaining? No, I won't. I just think McCann's the better appointment there. And who knows? Maybe it'll be Alex Ray. It could be anyone, right? There doesn't seem to be any concrete news about who that appointment will be. Only that we should expect that appointment to be incoming soon. So we'll see what happens. But yeah. Any closing thoughts, Jack? Or we can wrap it up there, mate. Jesus, what are we at? An hour and a half? Oh my lord!
I just realised that myself. Any closing thoughts? No, I just hope for a positive week, and that's all I can hope for. And hopefully, I'll take 3 points in Up Road tomorrow, and I'll take a League Cup final come Sunday evening in terms of where we are. So, not a large request.
Not at all, mate. Hibs obviously, but we got a decent result against them. I've said it a number of times. I think Hibs should have scalped us in that game. They could have been running away with it in the first half, and they didn't. So that result could have been very different if Hibs had made better decisions in that first half. But so that will be they will be no pushovers Wednesday, isn't it? And then we've got the Old Firm at the weekend semi-final. Who would have thought we'd be talking about coming up against Martin O'Neill in 2025? That's surreal, isn't it? But I'm confident, but reserved because I feel like that this club has a bad habit of slapping you in the face when you start getting a little bit too confident. So hopefully this time next week we'll be in a good place, and we'll be talking about those two results in a positive light. But yeah, unless you're getting anything else, Jack, we'll probably come back. I don't know if you're around, Jack, but maybe Sunday night after the game, or Monday morning we'll get something out. But until then, Jack, any closing thoughts?
No, it was good to have my weekly Rangers chat. I missed it last week, so I had to get as much out as possible. That's probably why we went an hour and 40 minutes. So
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
So yeah, thanks for everyone for listening to, again, me drone and hit you with my words like counter press and XG, and then trying to say I'm not really into that side of it. But yeah, thought it's been good.
Yeah, I do feel bad for the people tuning in sometimes. I'm like, you're really going to sit here and listen to us for 97 minutes? If you can see that one through, I really appreciate it. And just on that, I'd just like to mention we did go past 1,000 subscribers. I think we're about 1,020 at the moment. I mentioned this, and I'll continue to mention it. I'm so thankful for everyone that's tuning in and liking and subscribing. I did not expect this kind of traction. So thank you very much. Long may it continue. I'm really enjoying talking here for 98 minutes with Jack. Yeah, if you can stomach listening to us for that long, then credit to you. But yeah, like we will hopefully good luck to the team against Hibs and good luck to the team against the Old Firm, Celtic at the weekend. I'm hoping it'll be a positive week, but time will tell. Until then, thank you very much. This is Bold and Blue 1872, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
We are gold and blue, born in 1872, the greatest team in the world. We are known as we follow on. We are the people through and through, the bold and blue, since 1872. With our hearts on fire, we rise to the call. Through the highs and lows, we'll never fall. Glasgow Rangers standing proud and true. Together we sing for the bold.